My name is Niamh McCarthy. I am the manager here with the Parental Advocacy Service, which is delivered by Barnardos, which supports parents going through care proceedings. So, helping them to advocate and understand what is happening throughout those proceedings in meetings with TULSA, the Children's and Family Agency, and also through the court proceedings as well, helping them to access legal aid and other various methods that support them through their process. And today we are going to be looking at parental capacity assessments, which many parents need to undergo when they're undergoing childcare proceedings, and looking at their strengths as parents, but also some of the areas that they need to work on. And I'm delighted to say I am joined by Dr. Marcus Dowling today, who carries out a number of parental capacity assessments, and he's going to talk to us through those processes. A number of our parents have given us a number of questions to put to Marcus today, so we're just going to have a conversation back and forth to discuss those questions. Please feel free to use the chat function as well and put any of your questions in the chat. We do finish at 2 today, so if we don't get to everything, we will come back to it as well. And just to let everybody know that this webinar is recording as well. So that's enough about myself. I'm going to let Marcus introduce himself now.
Thanks, Niamh. I'm Marcus Dowling. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist who carries out a lot of independent parental capacity assessments for TUSLA and the courts. So my own background would be I've worked across several areas in psychology, mostly in forensic work and kind of family systems work, um, which which has brought me, I suppose, to doing a lot of these independent assessments, which is kind of a big area of interest of mine. Um, yeah, so my background, I suppose, would be mostly in attachment focused work.
Okay, really interesting. And when we're talking about parental capacity assessments, and I think people always refer to them as PCAs, or, we love abbreviating things. But if I'm a parent and I'm being asked to undergo one of a PCA or a parental capacity assessment, like, what is it? What does that mean for me?
Generally, a PCA would be requested when, like, oftentimes a parent might have children in the care system already, or they might have social work involvement with the family. And TUSLA or legal professionals might be seeking for a professional evaluation to take place, which would be looking at the parents' abilities to meet their children's emotional, uh, developmental, psychological, and physical needs. Um, uh, Typically, it would be carried out by a psychologist or another mental health professional, but it's also carried out by social workers with
Okay.
specialized training.
Oh, that's really interesting because um, that's often a question parents have, is who would do it? Does it have to be a psychologist? Will it be my social worker? Will it be? So that's really interesting that it's across a range of professions as well, but that there does need to be specialized training in it as well.
Yeah, I think that it would often depend on the type of parental capacity assessment that's being carried out. Like sometimes the focus might be really, really heavily on mental health difficulties, where in a situation like that, it might be useful to have a psychiatrist involved.
Okay.
Or if there's a heavy focus on addiction difficulties, it might be somebody who works specifically in addiction. But I think overall, parents are best served from engaging in a really comprehensive capacity assessment that takes into account a whole wide range of their own experiences when they're younger and as adults with their own children.
Yeah, because that was one of the questions our parents had as well. Is there different types of assessments? Like, we hear sometimes about cognitive assessments or attachment-based assessments, and I know that's your area of interest as well as attachment. But Could you talk to us a little bit about the different types, and then is there always that opportunity to have that the parent's own history brought into it as well, even if it's in a specific area?
Yeah, well, I think that it would be limiting to just focus on something such as addiction or mental health difficulties if without considering the parent's own background. But I suppose this is coming from my own attachment focused perspective.
Yeah,
I think that the relationship that you have with your own family of origin is one of the most significant factors in shaping you, your personality, and eventually your own parental style. So I think that, say, like sometimes it might be asked to just complete a cognitive assessment on parents, which can be useful, I suppose, to guide social work and interventions that are going to be put in place for the parents. But it's not great to be used as a standalone assessment of their abilities because research has shown that, you know, people who are even in the extremely low range of cognitive functioning, who might have a mild intellectual disability, might have a lot of strengths in other areas, might have a strong support network around them. They might be really strong in the amount of nurture that they're able to provide, but might struggle in providing structure to the children. So in certain situations like that, if you have a more rounded assessment rather than just a cognitive assessment, you'll be able to utilize the cognitive piece as a guideline to putting recommendations in place rather than making an overall judgment on the parent's capacity just based on their cognitive abilities.
right. So it's very much layered as well, that there's various different social, emotional, and other factors coming into play as well.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, you're looking at the parents' mental health, their emotional stability, but there's, as I said, like much more practical pieces around the parental skills that they've demonstrated themselves, the competency around understanding general child development and maybe their own child's specific developmental needs. Um, there's their ability to make appropriate decisions and judgments in relation to the child and their upbringing. And you're looking as well at like one of the most important tenets of good enough parenting would be for a parent's ability to engage appropriately with services when required.
Oh,
Um, and sometimes that can be a struggle for parents, understandably, when they've had a difficult relationship with child and family agencies. Um, they can sometimes find it difficult to step back and maybe compartmentalize, as we call it, those difficulties and put
yeah.
the child's needs first.
Oh,
Um, I find, and I suppose sometimes you would in your work, need like that. There's sometimes children who've gone through the care system themselves, grow up, have children, and have their own difficulties then, and that's a really layered
yeah,
relationship that they can have then with the system, that can make it difficult for them to engage fully.
yeah,
Um,
100%. Um, Marcus, just in the chat there, there was just one question around clarifying a forensic assessment. Is this ever needed in a childcare case?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, there's elements of it come into play when domestic violence is a feature. You might be looking there at a parent's risk towards their children if they've been perpetrating domestic violence, or maybe a parent's ability to protect the children where they were victims of domestic violence within a relationship. Um, but oftentimes, I suppose the forensic element would be much more of a feature where there might have been sexual abuse that's
Okay,
taken place in the family, and looking at the risk factors there. I've worked in cases where there was non-accidental injuries
okay,
um, for children, and you'll be looking at, I suppose, the parents' risks towards perpetrating violence there. And there's no set assessment tools for those, so you're trying to utilize um, general assessments around risks of violence.
okay, okay. So even from very focused assessments to forensics assessments. They're very layered so far in our conversation. So, how does it all work? Does it just happen over one session, or is it individualized to the parent? Or can you talk
Um,
to us a little bit about that?
sure, yeah, no, typically it'll take place over several sessions. And I suppose the reasons for that are for the several reasons. I mean, it would be parents are often overwhelmed in the first session. Um, they might not have been adequately prepared coming in. The process mightn't have been described to them. Sometimes you might have parents coming in thinking that they're only going to be engaging in a cognitive assessment and then are
Okay.
shocked to find that you're exploring their own traumas in their childhood. Um, and whilst you try and make or frame an assessment as somewhat therapeutic, so you're not diving into all these issues and you're trying to be sensitive to the parents' own needs, and you are trying to ascertain information and you are writing a report at the end of it. So it's challenging for parents coming into these assessments. So like that initial session is always overwhelming, and you trying to give a parent an opportunity to show their best self over a period of time rather than, just a single snapshot. So I would prefer to carry out assessments over like an 8 to 10 week period. Um, Parents will have good and bad days. Um, it also gives a parent an opportunity to reflect on their parenting between sessions, to be able to come back in with questions that they might have,
Oh, great.
or areas that they might have discussed already, and there's pieces that they'd forgotten or left out that might be relevant to the assessment.
Yeah, great. Because parents often talk about how overwhelming it is, and even getting to grips with the language and what is expected of them. And if I'm a parent, that's great that they can form their own questions and come back with questions and things like that. Can I request more sessions myself, or is it that we agree at the beginning, or that it's set out by the courts or the CFA what the terms of reference is?
Well, they tend to have terms of reference at the outset of the assessment, but I'd always be open to offering a parent an additional session if it was relevant.
Okay,
If there were specific areas that we needed to explore further or get a better understanding of, then I'd be open to that. I think that like there should always be a feedback session at the end of an assessment with parents so that you have an opportunity to explain your conclusions, and how you came to them and why you feel the
great.
specific recommendations are required for them.
Great. Because that's one of the things as well that people always ask about is how do we come to these recommendations? What happens with the recommendations? Do parents get a copy of the report with the recommendations?
Okay, so um, the recommendations come from, I suppose, if you uh, prepare a comprehensive assessment. So you're looking at their own background, as I said earlier, and
Yeah,
how their own personality was shaped. You're looking at their cognitive abilities. You might give a parent some what we call psychometrics. So they'd be questionnaires about their functioning and their mental health and their personality. And you'd be speaking to a lot of professionals who they might have engaged in already. That could be mental health professionals, teachers, social workers, guardians ad litem. And with all of that information together, I'd be putting together recommendations around therapeutic inputs, maybe group work around parenting skills or upskilling. And so that might be uh, more basic practical parental skills like Parents
yeah,
Plus, all the way up to more attachment focused intervention like the circle of security, where you might want a parent to develop a little bit more insight about what the children's experiences have been.
yeah,
Because sometimes a parent might themselves have experienced something as children, and this pattern reoccurs then when they have their own children. And I think a lot of us might have an attitude of, well, it didn't do me any harm, which is a common thing that might be said. Um, and I suppose those experiences might have been normalized for that parent. So it's helpful to have some supports in place to help them to understand how their own experiences might not have been appropriate, and that pattern that's developed might not be appropriate, and how changes could be made in that. Uh,
Yeah.
sorry, did I answer
Yeah.
the question properly?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
So it's a wide range of recommendations, and many times, and I will come to the questions in the chat as well. We're getting a few questions there just at the end, but there's a wide range of um, recommendations that come from looking at therapeutic supports to building on existing strengths or filling gaps as well. And one of the things that parents often ask us is, how, will somebody help me to access these therapeutic supports, or what do I do now that I have insight into I need to work on this, or how do I access those supports, or what happens, what are the next steps?
Yeah, well, so the report will go to, let's say, a report that was requested by social work department. It would go to the social workers, and then that would be distributed to the legal professionals if the case is before the courts. Um, and recommendations then, like, so I would have a feedback session with the parents, and I would have a feedback session with the social workers, and we discuss the recommendations and the practicalities around them, and I might suggest some therapists or some group work, specific
Okay.
group work to the social workers. But as you know, at the moment in Ireland, there's some barriers to accessing a lot of
Yeah.
interventions with wait lists and that. So that can unfortunately push back the timeline a little bit for parents, which is extremely frustrating for them. And can be quite disheartening as well, when they see little progress being made on the social work side of things while they're trying their best on their side. But I suppose um, the in most circumstances, the social workers appear to be happy to take on board these recommendations because they can see that they are in the best interest of the children. And what I often say to parents is that to reassure them that the reports that are written by a psychologist, they do go before the courts, and the parents will have access to their own legal teams who can raise these issues with the judge if they feel that the recommendations that were put in place are not being adequately provided to them to progress their case.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, because that is very frustrating when you want to make those positive changes or you want to strengthen your family and you just simply can't access the right supports
And as
at
well,
the right time.
it's a very stressful process going through these assessments and then having to take on board those recommendations. And oftentimes a parent might have expectations placed upon them, and they don't have those therapeutic supports to fall back on whilst they're trying to, progress their case. So yeah, it's in everyone's best interest to try and get them accessed as soon as possible. But unfortunately, sometimes there are barriers.
Yeah. Um, Now, I wouldn't see this happening regularly, but there's just a question in the chat around if I have been lucky enough to, within the time frame, have got access to the supports and carried out the therapeutic work and the other range of recommendations, would a second parenting capacity assessment be carried out then?
Well, I can't speak for every psychologist who's
Yeah.
carrying out these assessments, but the process that I typically use is I'll put a timeline on my recommendations, and I'll ask that a professional review take place. So that there will be a professionals meeting that takes place to look at how they've progressed through all the recommendations. I'd be asking questions of social workers if certain recommendations weren't put in place and why they weren't. Um, so like I don't, I know whilst it is very intimidating to come in for a parental capacity assessment, I don't see it as trying to trip up parents or catch them out or anything like that. It's really I'm going in trying to see what's been the barrier to them um, developing a better relationship with their children and progressing a reunification plan? And how can I support them in removing those barriers? So what kind of plan can we put in place that hasn't been done to date with them? And can we give that 3 to 6 months to see how that's working out for them before making any, more long-term plans for the children or alternative arrangements for the children?
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a great way of explaining it, isn't it? Because it is such an intimidating place to be in. And one of the other questions that we get a lot from parents is, what if I disagree with the recommendations? I completely disagree with them. Obviously, in your practice, you have your feedback session where you can hopefully explain
Yeah.
and the rationale and the things, but I'm still at a point where no, I don't agree with that.
Well, you can you you're not obliged to follow the recommendations. There's no legal onus on a parent to follow directions, but I suppose that can have implications for the reunification process. It's not that the psychologist is the decision maker in it, but I suppose oftentimes social workers will be taking on board these recommendations. And if they're not adhered to, they may feel that the parent isn't making the progress that they would expect. But I would say as well in that there's a feedback session, obviously,
Mm.
um, but any psychologist or any professional carrying out one of these assessments, if it's progressing to a point where the parent doesn't want to take on the recommendations and it goes to court, then that assessor will need to sit in the stand and be cross-examined by the parent's solicitor. So whatever um, arguments the parent has for not wanting to carry that out, that can be put to the assessor at that point. But the hope would be that any disagreement around the need for recommendations could be resolved at a feedback session if it's explained properly to the parent why it's required.
Okay, great. And I just might run through the questions in the chat, Marcus.
Sure.
So there's the first question is around, do you think there's scope for assessments or even assessments that need to be carried out at early education settings to get supports, etc., in place as early as possible for parents that may help prevent childcare proceedings happening in the first place if training was provided to managers, family support workers, etc., to complete assessments with parents? So I suppose,
Yeah, I'm very frustrated with the current system in place, and assessment of need is the worst of all. I know that there's 3 year and 4 year wait lists at some places in Dublin. I do think that uh, the earlier intervention is always the best, and that sometimes the lack of resources that are available or put in place for parents can make the struggle even more difficult. So I would be in agreement that, yeah, and any way to carry out an assessment of need earlier for children is to the benefit of their development, but also the parent who's struggling to support them.
okay, yeah. Um, I think it's really hard as well in early education settings as well to balance being the educator, the service provider, the assessor, and there's so many different
Yeah,
hats to wear. So it's very important as well in these things to be so boundaried in the work as
yeah.
well. And
And it's
that's why,
important, yeah, sorry to put across, it's important
yeah,
that like I mean, they will have different relationships with the parents than social workers will have. So it's important to maintain those relationships for the benefit of the parents and the children, I think. So it is good to be able to, like I said earlier, kind of compartmentalize that and section these pieces off. But yeah, I completely agree that there should be much more access to assessment and needs services for children.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty bad.
It's
But
frustrating.
the next question comes from Lisa. Do you think there is scope for assessments or even assess? Oh, sorry, that's the same one. Apologies. I'm moving down. And then, oh, So Brian, one of the participants, is working with a parent with an acquired brain injury where the primary impact is expressive communication. Are there specific people whom would you we would know who you would know of the PCA experience with acquired brain injuries?
Is it would I have carried out assessments with people with acquired
Yeah,
brain?
I
Is that?
presume so. Or is there a specific tool? My interpretation is there a specific tool that we would follow in those instances, I suppose, if expressive communication was a difficulty.
I think that like the cognitive piece would probably be very significant there, and you would be looking to see is there additional supports that might augment or improve their opportunities to communicate if that was the major difficulty around their parental capacity. Um, but there would be also suppose the whole systemic part of it where I feel that it's unavoidable. It's every person is a product of their own system. And in order to understand the person, you need to understand their system better. So I think there would be probably additional tools that would be put in place for assessing a person with an acquired brain injury. Um, and but also there would be a lot of the foundational elements that I would have discussed earlier for parental capacity assessment.
Great. Thank you so much, Marcus. We could talk all day about this. I think there's so many different layers to it, and it was great even to just get some understanding of what a parenting capacity assessment is, what the parents can experience going in, even for the way you described it there, talking about what are the barriers in parenting currently and looking to build on the strengths and identifying those gaps is a really nice way of being able to explain something that parents may be really overwhelmed with.
And
Um,
I think that, sorry, just a final
yeah,
thought that I can only speak for my own process, but I think that parents should, at the very least, expect that the process will be explained to them before
yeah,
they commence it. So be that by the social workers or having 15 or 20 minutes at the start of the first session to talk. But I'd always encourage parents to leave the first session because they'll probably be in a haze and take down any questions that they might have over the coming week or 2 weeks before their next session so that they come in a little bit more prepared and ask those questions.
that's a great tip. Yeah, brilliant. Um, Thank you so much for joining us today. And
No problem.
thank you so much to all the participants for logging on as well. And we will have this recording available on our website. And I'm just going to share our feedback form and our, sorry, the wonders of technology and our QR code. There was a few pieces in the chat that the advocates will follow up directly with people as well. And for anybody that would like to talk through or get further advice, we do have a free phone number as well, which is 1800 333 355. So I would really encourage people to do give us some feedback on the office form there. It's a really quick 1 or 2 minutes, but it just helps us to plan these webinars for the future as well. And again, I'd like to thank Marcus and really appreciate his input today.
No
Thank you,
problem. I hope
everybody.
it was helpful.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yes.
I'll leave this screen for a minute so that people can just do the QR codes, and then I will close down this webinar. And once again, thank you to everybody for logging on today. And I hope it's lovely and sunny where you are and enjoy. Oh, I think everybody has either downloaded that now, but please feel free to get in touch with us if you'd like any further information. Thank you so much.